Hello friends, it's Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead and we are going to do another meal video today. I'm going to show you the things that we are using that are growing on the homestead right now and how we're incorporating those into our meals. If you've been around here for a while, you know that every January and February I do a pantry challenge and I document all of the meals that we're making from our pantry in my videos, and that is using exclusively preserved food because it's winter. And I think a lot of people think we only eat preserved food, but we actually eat a lot of fresh food during the growing season. And so this summer, I'd like to bring you more of those meal videos. So we're going to be using the things that we do have growing on the homestead right now. Of course, that's eggs. We're constantly getting eggs cleaned up and put in the fridge and preserved right now. But the garden is also starting to produce. We just finished up asparagus season, and now we have lettuce and radishes, tons of herbs, a lot of greens and things like that. So in today's video, I'm going to show you what we are making with those items. My first meal I'm going to share with you is a smoked brisket. Now, I am new to smoking meat. It's just something I've been doing because I like cooking outdoors and we have this smoker. So I started by taking some hickory wood chips the night before and got them soaking in water because I heard that this helps give you a better smoke. So the next morning when we woke up bright and early, it was about 6:30, I got the smoker going and I drained the water from those hickory wood chips, and we were kind of waiting for the charcoal to be ready to sprinkle those wet wood chips around the edge. We have a green egg cooker. This is what we use as a smoker and we really love it. I spent then the rest of the morning while I was making breakfast for the family working on getting the smoker up to temp. But we needed to prepare our brisket. This is a beautiful homegrown brisket from last year's beef heifer, and I decided to put this barbecue rub on it. This was a gift from one of Adam's friends, and I've never used it before, but since it was in the pantry, I thought we would use it up. So about 30 minutes before we were going to put this on the smoker, I decided to sprinkle it with the rub and let it kind of sit and soak in for a little bit. And then we headed back outside, just enjoying the beautiful weather on this sunny morning. It was still warm before we had our cold snap that happened last week. And we are just waiting to get that smoker to temp. I wanted it over 200 degrees before I threw our brisket there on it and closed the lid. And then for the rest of the day, it was just monitoring that temperature to make sure it stayed around between 200 to 220 degrees. That's what I was aiming for. So I would just come out and check it and then add charcoal as needed to maintain that temperature. And thankfully, it was a beautiful day for smoking meat. But next, what we need to do is make some of the side dishes that we want to have with our brisket later that evening. The first thing I want to focus on is dessert. I decided to make a strawberry cake on this day in order to use up some of the strawberry syrup that I have preserved down in the pantry that I'm really trying to be intentional about using up before we preserve this year's strawberries. So I'm going to leave the exact recipe in the video description that I used. I basically took my typical vanilla cake recipe and took the liquid out of it, and in place of the milk, the almond milk or the cashew milk that I would use, I put strawberry syrup in it instead. And I also halved the sugar that is usually in the recipe since that strawberry syrup already was sweetened. So this was just really simple. I was definitely experimenting with this cake and it turned out amazing. Everybody said it had a really good strawberry flavor. So we're just getting all of those ingredients all mixed together. I'm gonna grease up and line with parchment paper my cake pans here. And we baked this in the oven until it was done. But now I need to work on our frosting. And I'm going to use a little bit of that strawberry syrup in my frosting as well. To make a dairy-free frosting, I usually use equal parts of palm fruit shortening and confectioner's or powdered sugar. Add a little bit of vanilla extract, and this time I added strawberry syrup too. And it was a beautiful pink color with a very mild strawberry flavor. That worked out really well. So I'm usually on the weekends when I make a big meal, I'm just in the mood to make a dessert, and it just so happened to be strawberry cake on this day. So check out the recipe in the video description if you would like to make strawberry cake. I also decided to make some coleslaw as a side dish with our brisket. So I started by taking my cabbage here and just chopping it up into little shreds. And then this is where we're going to use some of our garden vegetables that we have available. I have a big bag of radishes here. Radishes have been the thing that I've been trying to use up over the last couple weeks because we've just had a lot of them coming in from the garden. Now we do like to eat them raw. We also like to eat them cooked. Today we are going to add them to our coleslaw. So I just put them in with the cabbage as well as some chopped onion. And now we need to work on making our sauce for the coleslaw. So I'm going to start by making my basic mayonnaise recipe. I put 2 egg yolks in the blender with approximately 2 tablespoons of yellow mustard, 2 tablespoons of homemade apple cider vinegar, and a little bit of salt. We just put that in our little blender here and then drizzle in some avocado or regular olive oil while it's blending so that that oil will emulsify and we get a mayonnaise. Now to that mayonnaise, I'm going to add some honey. We like our coleslaw to be sweetened a little bit, and so in place of white sugar, I use honey. I'm going to drizzle in a little more apple cider vinegar, maybe about 1/4 cup. I'm going to put in 2 teaspoons of celery salt here, and then I want to add a little more yellow mustard. And we're just going to get that all blended back together, and this is going to be the sauce that we pour over the vegetables in our coleslaw. Once I got that all mixed up together, I'm just going to salt and pepper it really well, and then this coleslaw is definitely better after it sits in the fridge to kind of let all of the flavors come together for a while. So we made that early in the day and let it sit in the fridge while the brisket was coming up to temperature. My goal was to get it around 195 degrees, the internal meat temperature. That's when I knew that it was done. So once we got it close to that, some people like 190 degrees all the way up to 200 degrees. I just figured right around 195 was probably good enough. And we're going to let that brisket rest for a little bit. So a lot of people will use a cooler for this. We just need something insulated. So I threw some towels over the top of this contraption. We let that rest for at least an hour. More would be ideal. Now I'm going to fry up some potatoes. I grabbed 2 quarts of home canned potatoes, threw some bacon grease into my cast iron pan, and just literally dumped those quarts of canned potatoes. This is such a convenient side dish. And then we're just going to fry them up in the bacon grease for a little bit, add a little bit of extra salt and pepper, and by this point, our brisket was done. So I can get that all sliced up, and now we are ready to eat. So like I said, I am new to smoking on this green egg cooker. There's definitely a learning curve. I have some things like in terms of maintaining temperature to make it easier that I'm going to work at, but it actually ended up being very delicious. That hickory wood gave it a wonderful smoky flavor. We really did enjoy that rub that we put on it. And then of course, everybody loved the strawberry cake. So this was a wonderful meal that we had that used up some eggs that we have coming in from the garden right now in the cake. We got some radishes used up in our coleslaw. And so now we're going to move on to another meal that we're making using up both of those ingredients. I'm going to bring you now a breakfast that we're going to use up some eggs and radishes in as well. So I'm going to start by making a pizza crust. This is my basic pizza crust. I'm also going to put in the video description if you want it written out for you. We're going to start by activating our yeast with some water and sugar. I'm getting some bacon cooking on the stove. And then I grabbed those radishes and some green onions. We're going to get those chopped up. This was definitely an experimental recipe. I came up with this just that day, decided that I was going to make it. It sounded good to me in my head, and it actually turned out pretty good. So we put in our flour. I did 5 cups of flour. We added in our avocado oil and some salt, and we're going to get that in the mixer kneading for a while. I did decide before we got it kneading to add a little bit of that green onion to it. This is my pizza crust recipe, and usually I would add pizza spices like oregano or basil to my crust, and I just thought, hey, I have the green onion. Why don't I put that in the crust for a little bit of flavor on this day? I think some garlic salt or something like that would also be really good, I don't think you can really go wrong. I love my my Bosch mixer here. It does a great job of kneading large amounts of dough like that. So while it was kneading it, I cracked open my eggs. I decided to do 1 dozen eggs with 1 pound of bacon. And now I'm going to grease up with some of that bacon grease my biggest cast iron that I have, and we're going to punch down that pizza dough to make the crust for our breakfast pizza. I just kind of used my hands to form it to the cast iron. We're just going to dump our eggs on top. I decided not to scramble them. And then we can start putting our radishes and our green onions here. Any garden veggies this time of year would be good. Like Swiss chard would be really wonderful, or some kale or spinach. And then if you didn't have bacon, you could do ham, any kind of sausage or whatever. You can't really go wrong with this. Just kind of layer it on in there. And then we're going to stick it in the oven on about 400 degrees. But I did put foil around the edge so that my crust didn't burn. And it baked for about 40 minutes. We're just kind of keeping an eye on it. We wanted that center to be cooked, but I wanted to leave my egg yolks a little bit runny. We like that texture when you cut into it. So once we had it all cooked up, I decided to clean up some fruit. We served it with some raspberries and some citrus. And the great thing about when you put it in the cast iron is you can just pop it straight out, put it on the countertop, and we can slice it up to serve. So this is what that looked like. It's very bready, as you can see. It is a breakfast, and so those carbohydrates do fill hungry bellies, but there's enough protein in the egg and the bacon that I thought it made a nutritious breakfast for the children. So portioning it out into our little slices, you can see how I said I like those yolks still a little bit runny. We don't want them thoroughly cooked through like a hard-boiled egg. And that is what we had for breakfast. It was definitely a hit. The kids said they would love to eat it again. So that is an experiment that succeeded, and we will definitely try again in the future. Now we're going to move on to another meal. The first thing I'm going to do is run out to the garden and get some lettuce. So our lettuce is doing wonderfully this year. Thankfully, the temperatures got a little cooler this last week. I thought I was going to have to put shade cloth over my lettuce in the garden because it was extremely warm the week before, and I was worried about my lettuce bolting. But thankfully, this cooler weather and the cloud cover this lettuce is just thriving. So we are so grateful. It was a long winter without fresh salads, and we are definitely enjoying them now. I always take my lettuce that I harvest and put it in a bowl of cool water to let that soak and get any dirt and debris off. And then I just chopped up some radishes and we tossed that in. Now today we are going to make chicken livers and chicken gizzards. This was Adam's request, and I know this isn't everybody's cup of tea. It isn't even all of my children's cup of tea, so I always make some chicken breasts on the side for the people that don't like this. But for those of you that are curious how you would cook this up, let me show you what you do. So we salted our chicken gizzards really well and added some cloves of garlic and an onion to a pot, filled it with water, and we're going to get those boiling on the stove. I just bring it to a boil, and then after that I bring it down to a simmer and let it do that for about an hour. Chicken gizzards are very tough, and so by boiling them this way, it does tenderize them a little bit before you bread them and fry them. Here are the chicken breasts that I made for everybody that didn't want gizzards or livers. I poured 1 pint of my home canned peach and tomato salsa over the top of that. That has peaches, tomatoes, onions, jalapeno pepper, all sorts of wonderful garlic flavor. We just salt and peppered it a little bit too. Stuck that in the oven on 400 degrees and just let those chicken breasts bake while we work on the rest of the meal. We're going to make a dessert. I want to make some brownies. So I'm starting with 2 cups of flour. To that I added 1 cup of sugar and 2/3 a cup of cacao powder. And then to that we need to add our baking powder. I'm just going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and those are the dry ingredients that we're going to mix together. To that I added about 2/3 of a cup of avocado oil. You could use any liquid fat. We added 4 eggs, and then we're going to add about 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. I started mixing that up, and then I decided that maybe some nuts would be good in this, and I have macadamia nuts in the house after an azure pickup this week. So I added 1 cup of macadamia nuts, and I also decided to add 1 cup of white chocolate chips. And so we just mixed that all together, and we baked that in the oven on 350 degrees until the center was, a toothpick came out clean. I think it was probably about 40 minutes or so. And that is what our brownies are going to look like. Now we're going to move on to the next step of making our meal. I need a side dish for our chicken gizzards, so we're going to fry up some potatoes in bacon grease once again. Now, by this point, our gizzards had been simmering for an hour, so I drained the hot water out, and those need to cool down before we're going to be able to fry them. So I'm going to get to work on the other steps in preparing for frying these. So I have 1 quart here of some home rendered beef tallow. I love to use beef tallow for frying when we're doing meats. It does have a slight beefy flavor, but it still works perfectly. So I just stuck it in the oven and let it melt down enough so that I could get it out of the quart jar and put it in my pan on the stove to get it nice and hot. In the meantime, we're going to make our breading for the chicken gizzards and the chicken livers. So I just have flour here, and to that we added paprika, salt and pepper, and I had garlic scape powder. Garlic scapes are the flower stalks of the garlic plant. They have a very mild garlic flavor that's very good. So that's what we decided to use for our breading. I'm just pulling down those cooled down chicken gizzards, and we're going to coat them in the flour mixture and then just pop them in our hot tallow to fry. Thankfully, the chicken livers are tender enough that they don't need boiled prior to frying. So those were a lot easier to manage. We just took the raw chicken livers and dipped them in the breading and also fried those up separately from the gizzards because they are different consistencies and needed different frying times. So this is what our meal looked like. We have potatoes and salad and the gizzards and livers and our brownies. And so, like I said, not all of my children, you're probably wondering, will toddlers eat those? Yes, the toddlers will eat them because they don't know what they are. But some of the older kids that will ask questions and are aware of that they're eating chicken gizzards are just not a fan. So I mostly made this meal for Adam. That's part of homestead eating is you want to utilize every part of the animal that you work so hard to raise. And, you know, if you do have other animals like dogs or pigs, those parts won't go to waste. You can feed them to them if you don't like them. But Adam actually loves organ meat, and I love making it for him. And then I always just like to have an option for the people that don't like it. So the chicken breast worked fine for the other children. And then, of course, having a nice dessert available to motivate children to eat their vegetables and their organ meat, if that's what they put on their plate, always helps. So this is what our brownies ended up looking like. The macadamia nuts were a nice treat. We don't always have those in the house, and so I was happy to have those for the kids. And then the white chocolate chips melted down and gave some good flavor as well. So you can see that the vegetables we have available from the garden at this point are pretty sparse. We just have the lettuce and greens and radishes and things, but it won't be very long before we're going to be harvesting all sorts of other items. And my goal for the summer months this year are just to bring you a lot of these meal videos to show you how we are using fresh veggies and things in our meals, as well as combining them with the preserved items that we use all the time from our pantry that I love to show you. So if you enjoy my winter series of Pantry Challenge meals, hopefully you will enjoy this summer series as well. And that's it for this week, friends. We'll be back next week. I hope you have a wonderful one, and we will see you later. Bye.